Right, we're ready to begin.
Welcome to the Forum for Candidates for Alderman of the 6th and 7th Wards in Evanston. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Evanston and the Evanston Public Library. My name is Lois Taft, and I serve on the board for the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan political organization dedicated to promoting the active and informed participation of citizens in government. The League takes positions on issues, but neither endorses nor opposes any candidate for public office. This forum is being recorded and will be available on demand on YouTube with links to the video from our website. In addition to questions from League members and community partners, the public was invited to submit questions for this forum. The deadline for questions was 48 hours prior to the event, and the League has reviewed the questions for appropriateness for the office, to ensure that questions are directed to all candidates, and to eliminate duplication. All candidates for the 6th and 7th wards were invited to participate in the forum, and with us today are 6th ward candidates Catherine Trippi and Tom Sufferdine, and 7th ward candidates Eleanor Ravel and Mary Wazinski. Our moderator for today's forum is Jan Flappen of Chicago. She's past president of the League of Women Voters of Chicago and the League of Women Voters of Illinois, and she served 2 terms as a board member for the National League of Women Voters. She's a former teacher and an executive director of a small social service agency. Welcome.
Thank you, Lois. I'm going to take just a couple minutes to summarize the format. The candidates will have 90 seconds to make their opening statements. Then each candidate has up to 90 seconds to respond to each question. I'll call on candidates to respond in rotating order, with Ward 6 going first for the first 4 questions. Then Ward 7 will go first for questions 5 through 8. If we have time for more questions, then we'll rotate again. And all candidates will answer each question. The closing statements are also 90 seconds. The opening and closing statements and responses will be timed. A League member will be the timer, and all candidates and I can see the timer. As moderator, I'll enforce the time limits and the rules that the candidates agreed to. We'll begin with the opening statements. They'll be in alphabetical order by last name, with Ward 6 going first. Candidate Sufferdin, you are first.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the League for putting this together. My name is Tom Sufferdin. I've been the Alderman of the 6th Ward since 2017. I've been committed to transparency and fiscal responsibility. I think our government, it fails to serve the people when we don't put forth plans, we don't follow through on plans, and we just send bills to our residents. My opponent is going to talk about how my vote on reparations is the reason she's running. And the implication is going to be that I am racist and I don't represent her values. But I want to point out that there has been no group that has met with both of us who has chosen to endorse her. There's been no group that does any racial equity advancement in Evanston that has chosen to endorse her, and that her values are hers. But the reality is, what we're hearing from Black Evanstonians, particularly about reparations, is that this plan is flawed. And when I took my vote, which was no when there was zero plan, that was the right vote. She's going to imply that I should be ashamed of it. I'm not. I'm proud of it, because that is too important of an issue to play around with. And it is not about white people in Evanston feeling good about themselves. It's about having an actual executable plan. Anyway, Ms. Trippi, I invite you to make your opening statement.
Thank you, candidate Trippi.
Thank you. My name is Katie Trippi, and I am proud to be running for the 6th Ward Alderman position. I am a 3rd generation Evanstonian. I've lived here in the 6th Ward for 30 years, more than 30 years, raised 3 children here. And I feel like I do understand not only the 6th Ward, but Evanston as well. I come from a very large and active Evanston family. In fact, if I'm elected in April, I will be a second generation Evanston City Councilman. My stepfather, Jim Moran, was a councilman in the 70s, and his proud legacy lives on through the work of the James B. Moran Center for Youth Advocacy here in town. I have three major issues that I am interested in pushing forward while I'm on the city council. The first and most important is to support Evanston's small businesses and minority-owned businesses as they recover from this pandemic. The second is to make sure that Evanston remains affordable for the people who live here, so that we can create and keep the community of people that we aspire to be. Affordable in housing, but also affordable in living. And finally, I believe that we as a city must serve the youth of this town and assure that they have the equitable, accessible ability to stay involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to Ward 7, candidate Ravel.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Evanston and to the Evanston Public Library for this good opportunity to talk with residents. My name is Eleanor Ravel, and I'm the current 7th Ward Alderman. My family and I have lived in Evanston for over 40 years. My husband is a psychology professor at Northwestern, and our 2 sons are proud graduates of ETHS. During my 5 years as alderman, I've drawn on my past experience working with a number of local organizations to promote citizen advocacy, good government, and in particular, a sound environmental future for all of us. I got my start actually with the League of Women Voters of Evanston. I learned a huge amount about local city government with the League and about key public policy issues like land use and zoning and planning and preservation. I served as the Evanston League of Women Voters president and also as president of the Illinois League. I was a founding member of the Public Service Challenge, the Leadership Evanston. I was a board member and president of the Evanston Community Foundation, and finally president and a founding board member of Citizens Greener Evanston. These experiences have really given me a good foundation for evaluating the public policy issues that come to City Council and for listening to all the citizens to come up with a solution that's going to meet as many people's concerns as possible.
Thank you. Candidate Rosinski.
Hi, thank you again for hosting this. My name's Mary Rosinski. I am going to start with my qualifications for this job. I am a 40-year real estate broker coming from a real estate family. So I bring an immense amount of experience in negotiating, looking at contracts. So one of the 3 items that I am working on is financial planning for the city, a long-term budgeting for the city, and a long-term comprehensive planning for our zoning. I have been active for 25 years in all the ward issues and in city issues. I started with organizing groups to save our public lighthouse beach parkfront from being privatized, went to creating Central Street Neighbors with fellow residents that implemented a zoning ordinance that was passed for the Central Street Master Plan. In addition to that, I've also been involved in many community organizations such as the D.J. Coleman Foundation Against Gun Violence, the Evanston Public Library Funds, and various other community organizations that help to unite people. I got involved originally about 25 years ago because of zoning issues in the city. And at that time, much of the contention in the city was about confidence and trust, and it hasn't really gotten any better. So I feel like we really need to work on things that everyone knows, everyone follows the same rules. I've raised 5 children here. I'll stop.
Thank you. Candidate Suffredin.
I get another one? I think I already went.
Oh, you already went. Sorry, I didn't.
Do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't hear you.
No, you didn't answer. I'm sorry. The first question.
Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. I'm ready.
No, we're going to go to the first question now. Well, candidate Trippy is first with the first question. As City Council and staff work to balance the budget, what actions would you support regarding the reserve fund and payments to the pension funds?
That's an excellent question. And the budget work and the guarding of the taxpayer money in this town is the most important responsibility of the City Council. I believe that we have the duty to fulfill our obligations, more than fulfill our obligations to our pension funds, because we have a history of not paying into them the way that we should have, and we have to make up for what's happened in the past. On the other hand, one of the hardest things about staying in Evanston, as you, if you are able to live here, afford to live here to begin with, is our taxes. They are out of control, and it is part of the responsibility of the city government to ensure that we do not put an undue tax burden on our citizens. Unfortunately, the city of Evanston is the smallest, or one of the smaller portions of our tax bills. Our two school districts take an enormous amount of our tax dollar.
Thank you. Now candidate Suffredin, the same question.
Sure. And at the Center Street Neighbors Forum, the questionnaire that my opponent filled out said, I need more information on the city budget before I can answer this question. And she should have said that before that.
Candidate, let's not have any personal attacks, please.
Well, let's be clear though about answering this question. So the pensions need to be paid, they need to be a higher priority than the reserves. The reserves are nice to have, and they look good to rating agencies externally, and it would cost less for us to borrow money. But the pensions have always been an issue in Evanston. They're always going to be an issue in Illinois because we have to fund them ourselves, and we need to look at, particularly when we're talking about asset sales, which are, I hope, another question that we'll be discussing in this forum, putting that money directly to pensions, because that's what's getting away from us, is the compounding on pensions. And that needs to be our top fiscal priority. So in terms of concrete things, I think that money from asset sales needs to be put straight to pensions. I don't think that's a reason to undertake asset sales alone, but as we do that, we should make sure that we don't let that money float away and get used for other purposes. We need to make sure the pensions are our top priority, because that is driving the taxes that Ms. Trivy talked about, and that's what's driving people out. The ability to increase property taxes is something that the city should not look at, because we are a small part of the bill, but the total bill is very high, and that's what's keeping people from coming here. It's what's chasing people out, and the people who are here, it's creating a lot of problems for them. So raising property taxes for pensions, no, but looking at other ways to get revenue, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Now we will go to Ward 7. The first question, the same question, candidate Rosinski, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I think, yes, actually, probably yes.
City Council and staff work to balance the budget. What actions would you support regarding the reserve fund and payments to the pension funds?
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, first of all, the reserve fund, first of all, let me say there's a lot of money in the budget that is kind of here and there. In fact, as of, I think, last week, we still did not have our year-end December financial report year-to-date. So I think one thing we need to be doing is getting our budget year-to-date reports, so that we see every month when those come up, not what were proposed, but what we actually are. So the reserves, there is money kind of in different places that I am not sure is not really there. And I agree with Mr. Suffredin in the sense that the reserve is nice to have, but I think we can gradually build that up. The pensions are a must. And if we spend, what we need to do is we need to stop spending money on projects that we don't need. We also need to manage those projects a lot better. We could save millions. In the last 5 years, I think we've spent probably 30 million more than we needed to do because we did not manage our money well. So I think that is a critical, that goes back to the long-term planning, that goes on to evaluating and how we're negotiating contracts. And it goes back to how we are going to, and what's important in our committee, in our community. Thank you. I think that pretty much says how I feel.
Thank you. Candidate Ravel.
Well, it's hard to disagree with everyone here on this forum this morning. The reserve fund is, we do want to try to build it up to be 16% of our expenditure. So we have that for a rainy day, and we had a big rainy day with the pandemic, and we did draw down we did rely on that to help with the budget and the revenue shortfall. So over time, we do need to build that back up. But as I agree with my colleagues here, the pension fund is a must. Every year that we don't put in enough money, we fall further behind because we don't have the money in the pension fund to invest and get interest income. So absolutely, we must continue and really accelerate the amount of money we put into the pension fund. And I agree with Alderman candidate Suffredin that we should look to put some of the proceeds, if we do have an asset sale, into the pension fund. That would really help enormously.
Thank you. Candidate Suffredin, you will be first with the next question. Do you think the City Council should change the way public comment takes place at council meetings? And if so, how?
Sure. Yes, I think that is a simple rule change that the next council can undertake very early on. The complaints that are heard most often from people participating in public comment is that it is not considered by members of the council. And so I think one of the problems that we have is that we do it at the front end of the meeting. I think there's a way that we could have a public comment time related to upcoming agenda items rather than the night of the agenda item being considered. I think we could also allow for periodic meetings, say monthly, that have extended public comment time or that have focused public comment on a particular issue rather than on an item that's to be voted on that evening. I think from the meeting facilitation side, it's inefficient to have open-ended public comment on the front end of a meeting. We should probably have it confined to agenda items and have non-agenda items considered after a meeting. But I think the most important thing of any public comment framework is that all those participating feel that their time is being valued and that their input is being considered, because that's really what's missing from what we have now. And there's really no, the amount of time, all that is doesn't mean anything if people don't feel like they're being heard. And that's the issue that we have with the current structure of public comment.
Thank you. Candidate Trippi.
Yes, I have to say I agree that the way that our public comment is structured currently is not working in any sense of the word. I don't believe that aldermen are getting the full array of information that they need from the citizens of Evanston about the topics. And I also agree that the people who are taking the time to make their comments are not feeling that they have been heard. I would really like to invite the League of Women Voters to take a look at the way that other progressive people, other progressive towns handle their public meetings. What are some ways that public comment is working in other communities where we do have a very large and very involved electorate, citizenry. Evanston is lucky to have so many people that are so passionate on so many sides of every issue. And we do have to take that into account as we hold our public forums. One of the reasons that the public comment has been changed over the years is that city council meetings have been lasting until 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. That's not acceptable either. But there has to be another way, and I think the League of Women Voters could help us find it.
Thank you. Now Ward 7 will answer the same question. Candidate Ravel.
Well, I really appreciate Candidate Trippi's suggestion for the league to look into this to see what other communities might be doing that works better than what we have. I agree that we do need to come up with a better way. And I think the citizens who feel that we arrive on Monday night and we've pretty well got our minds made up are probably right. And so we need to find a way for the citizens to be able to share their thoughts about particularly the really bigger controversial issues, find a way for them to be able to talk with us sooner rather than waiting for that one Monday night when we're making the decision. We've talked a little bit about possibly having an occasional Saturday morning public comment, more than a public comment, an actual exchange. I think in addition to the fact that people feel they're not, they're making their comments at the very end of the whole process, but I think people are also looking for something besides just the stone-faced array of city council members sitting there and not responding at all. So I think perhaps a Saturday morning where there's an opportunity for some back and forth give and take well before we're actually getting to making our final decision would help engender more of a feeling that residents are being listened to.
Thank you. Candidate Rosinski.
Yeah, I think what's happened over the last 5 years with our public comment is not good. We've reduced their time. We have in all the committees too. And we have not allowed the people who are concerned about an issue to line up or cede time to get the idea across. And so I asked myself, where does this start? And it starts because the residents aren't getting involved at the very beginning. And I think there's big issues that the people should know about well before they're getting ready for a decision. And so that might prompt having a town hall for people to ask questions, because having been going there for 25 years and seeing people come and the audience is larger and larger, it's because people do not feel informed and represented, and they want answers, and they're not getting answers at public comment. Also, I think, if you're going to have a council meeting, it needs to start on time, and people need to be able to count on it, and they need to be able to follow it. I love that we have Zoom. I think it allows for a great opportunity to have town halls, get questions out long before the issue comes up for vote. And then they can have questions answered publicly. There's no dialogue, and there needs to be more dialogue. Personally, if I'm going to be the alderman, I will be having town halls before major issues. My residents will know about issues before they are. I have generally been one of the people who's brought issues in the ward to the people for discussion, hence.
Thank you.
What it says stop.
Thank you. Candidate Trippi, you will be first with the next question. What resources does Evanston need to prevent further violence and loss of life in the community?
Again, this is a very serious and very daunting issue. And we are not the only community that is struggling with it in this country. I think that the violence against our citizens that has come up in the last couple of weeks, as well as things that have happened around the country over the last year, have highlighted just the tragedy of the situation and the ways that different communities are grappling with it. It is important that we have an assessment of our police department in understanding the types of trainings that they're getting, and that type of thing, that the police are being held accountable in police-initiated violence. The gun violence that is wrecking our community between our citizens is unacceptable and unfortunately not new to Evanston. I will commit to being part of the solution and certainly not adding to the discussion in a way that is harmful.
Thank you. Candidate Suffredin.
Thank you for the question. I spent the morning at the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program job fair, and that's really a big part of this is youth employment. that is a huge aspect of the underlying issues that lead to further problems later, is when you have people, particularly young people in a high school age, mostly, who have idle time, and also a feeling that their time is not valuable and that their efforts won't be rewarded, and that there is no purpose to being engaged in anything productive. And that's a huge problem, not just in Evanston. So the youth and young adult program that we have and that we had in place under Kevin Brown and that we have in place now is very valuable, and it needs to be respected and funded appropriately. Sometimes I think it's easy to dismiss the work that's done to prevent things from happening because there's no evidence that they were prevented, but there is evidence that that program works. It worked, it will work, and it needs to be funded appropriately. We have outreach workers who know what's going on and can get to problems before they become violent problems. And that is huge. And it's an important issue for the city of Evanston, because what we've seen recently and what we've seen over the past 10 years or so is that the violence starts very subtly and builds, and we need to stop it on the front end.
Thank you. Now, same question. No, sorry. Yeah, same question goes to Ward 7, candidate Rosinski.
I agree with, previous candidates. It really does start with having your feet on the street and being connected with the community. And I think one of the things the youth engagement thing with Brown did was he knew people. It's like the crossfire. You can see things are rising, and you can send things you can send people in to help diffuse the situation maybe before it is. I mean, it's interesting, coming from a really large family, and Evanston is a very large family, and people know stuff. And if they trust you, they will talk. Everything's connected. We're much smaller than people believe. And so, like, I have my own family can tell when something's wrong. I may not get it directly, but I'll get it from someone else. And then I can start to intervene on that. So I think between that, we need that solid trust in the police department and in the city, holding hands in hands with the community member, reaching out to our youth. And I also have been a firm believer for years regarding the jobs employment. One of my own almost son-in-law was toying with, he was homeless, he was toying with gangs. My daughter met him, we got him a job. The rebuilding warehouse took him in, gave him an apprenticeship, and now he's got a really good paying job. And things like that brought him from here. It changed his whole trajectory. And I'd like to say, when our friend of ours, Deja Coleman, got murdered, he's my daughter's friends, we started the Deja Coleman Foundation, which went in and worked with the kids to have a future that was going to be good.
Thank you.
That's what I would say.
Thank you. Candidate Revelle.
Well, I agree that our youth and young adult program is really effective. We need to maintain, perhaps even be able to hire additional outreach workers to be out in the community and connecting with our young people, helping them get the support they need to find a meaningful role in the community. And the mayor's youth and summer job employment program is really a really important program as well, to help give our at-risk youth an opportunity to find some success. I think we also need to realize that we should be thinking about ways to provide opportunities for success way before the kids get to be 18 and 20 years old. We need to make sure that they have opportunities to be successful in school, through sports, through our Parks and Rec department. We have a number of wonderful local nonprofits that provide opportunities for youth to be successful, whether it's job opportunities or poetry and arts, and it's a whole community effort to make sure all of our young people reach adulthood in a successful way. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question goes first to Ward 6, candidate Suffredin. The first stage of the proposed reparations program focuses on housing. What are the next programs that should be supported? And how do you propose to set priorities?
Oh, thank you for that question. That's a topic of much discussion because right now there is no second program planned. In terms of setting priorities, the way that this is structured, the top priority is for people who fall into the ancestor category. Those are people directly affected by discrimination prior to 1969. So in terms of what should be next, I think as the qualification process happens, we should ask the people who qualify what they think should be next. That's one of the complaints that's come to the surface, particularly in the last week or so, but I think throughout this process where there are people who feel that they're not being consulted on what the contents of their own repair will be. And so in terms of what it should be, I have ideas, but they're not relevant. I am not a person who would qualify or be repaired. So I think we should listen. The biggest concern that I continue to have is that if we're doing it at a $25,000 per qualified resident pace, we only have committed enough money for 400 people. We do not have any commitment beyond $10 million. We also do not have $10 million. So we need to figure out what the scope and of the plan will be and figure out how underfunded we are and figure out a way to close that gap. And I'm committed to doing that work when I'm reelected on the city council.
Thank you. Candidate Trippi.
Sure. I have to say that I applaud the efforts of this current council in their work, in their reparations work, and especially the reparations subcommittee. This is such an important topic, and it is so important that Evanston has chosen to be the first in the nation to take it on. And we can't expect to be perfect in our in the way that we start, but we can expect to continue to try to do better as we go along. There's an entire array of harm that has been historically instituted against our Black community here in Evanston. They include housing, they include over-policing, they include the lack of a neighborhood school and a neighborhood community organizations like the YMCA that was closed. They include a lack of support for Black-owned businesses, predatory lending policies, and environmental negative impact, especially in our Black communities. So all of these aspects are areas that our reparations could address. But again, reparations is an individual concept, and each person who deserves the repair needs to name what that repair will be to feel sufficient.
Thank you. Now Ward 7, Candidate Revelle.
Well, I agree that $10 million sounds in a way like a lot of money to put towards reparations, but it's going to be just a bare start towards truly addressing the harm that our Black residents experience. So but I fully support our getting started with this. It's going to take us a long time to figure out how much money is going to be enough and where is the more than 10 million going to come from. But I support our getting started with the program. I think the housing program directly relates to the harm that was caused by the redlining in our community. And we have to be really mindful of the need to be able to have a strong legal basis for the program. In the resolution that the council passed, setting up the whole reparations concept, we identified housing, economic development, and then educational initiatives. So so far the subcommittee has worked really hard to get the housing program figured out. Once that gets underway, then they can turn their attention to developing the next kinds of programs particularly, for example, economic development to help Black businesses. So I have confidence in our ability to do this.
Thank you. Candidate Rosinsky.
I do support the reparations. I always have. I think the consequences fall, on housing, but they fall on education. They fall on so many other attributes that happen to a family over time. And I'm a little bothered by this because there seems to be a growing opposition to the plan that's being pushed forward. And it just strikes me as not okay that a program that has been created because people were excluded, that are people that are beneficiaries or should be beneficiaries at that program that feel excluded from the process. So I would encourage people to make sure everyone who, I don't even think we've identified everyone who's in the program. And so I feel everyone who's in the program should be part of the discussion at the table as we move forward. And like you say, there's housing, but there's education. Could the money be used for business startups? I mean, who's to say? I don't think it's our city responsibility, nor should we be telling people what to do with their money. The second thing, I just do want to point out how this ties into $10 million. We gave one contractor at Robert Crown $10 million more than the next best contractor to fulfill the contract that they had with the city, and by meeting the business and minority requirement. And by the way, they did not meet it. So I almost feel like that contractor should give that money back and fund the reparations.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, for questions 5 through 8, we're going to go to Ward 7 first, and candidate Ravel will answer the next question first. Are there any specific zoning changes you would propose or support beyond accessory dwelling units, ADUs, and the inclusionary housing ordinance that you believe would increase the number of new housing units for rental and or ownership?
Well, I do support our taking a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance to see what we can do to make it possible to have greater variety of houses and perhaps smaller lot sizes in all parts of our, in all neighborhoods in our community. The auxiliary dwelling unit changes that we've made are a step in that direction, as well as the efficiency homes program that we're going to be voting on Monday night. Those are ways to get some smaller homes in the R1 and R2 districts, but we could do more in terms of changing the required lot size and perhaps changing the required lot width. One idea that I would like us to look at is some of the big old homes that are in Evanston that were built for families in the days when there were really large families. Some of those would be we could turn those in, they could be turned into homes for 2 families that would maybe perhaps meet some of the smaller family size that a lot of our families have today. So I think those kinds of changes wouldn't change the appearance of the neighborhood, but it would add some gentle density to the R1 and the R2 districts. So I do support our taking a comprehensive look at our zoning ordinance to see what other kinds of possibilities we have.
Thank you. Candidate Rosinski.
I do think we should look at our zoning ordinance, but I think we also should not just be randomly saying that we're going to change all the requirements that are in a zoning. I think if people buy their house in a certain area and they have a certain lot, one concern I've been getting from people as I knock on doors is, oh, is a 4-unit building going to go up next to me if we change that? I said, I don't think that's the idea here. I think it's up for discussion as to where, like my neighborhood, maybe it's a little bit more dense right now anyway. So maybe my neighborhood should allow for 2-unit buildings. But I think it has to be a community discussions. I think we have to look at all the tax implications for property people. When people buy property, they are investing probably their biggest amount of money in an asset that they need to feel confident. If people come to our community and do not feel confident, they are going to bypass our community and bring their property tax dollars somewhere else. So I think we need to look at, yes, I am well aware of the role that zoning played in discrimination. So that's not the issue. The issue is we are aware of that. I also want to get onto the point that density does not create affordable housing if you don't have a plan. And third of all, there are affordable housing abilities. There is a building on the market, just as an example, right now over on Judson, 35 units, $7 million, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that could be worked into a program if we had built up money to be able to buy it and put people in there. And we know we need 3-unit building, 3-unit properties for families.
Thank you. Now, Ward 6, candidate Suffredin.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I think, and I'll build off of what Mary said about density not necessarily leading to affordability. Any examination of the zoning of the city of Evanston should begin with an objective and then work from there. I think a lot of times we create plans that we hope will achieve an objective rather than starting from the objective and working backwards. So I think if the goal is to create more affordable units throughout the city, we should look at the zoning with that in mind, but keeping in mind what Mary said, which is people who own property already are relying on zoning to protect their investment. So that has to be part of the discussion. I know it has an exclusionary history, but we can't make these sweeping changes and then hope that it'll lead to an outcome and then act surprised when it doesn't lead to the outcome and it has several unintended consequences. So I think that the mayor-elect has been very clear that he intends to have an examination of the zoning code. So I think it's something that the council will have to discuss publicly very, very early on in the next term. I think in terms of any specifics, I think everything should be on the table for examination and discussion. And as long as it's an open, public, transparent process with a clearly assigned objective at the beginning and all voices at the table, I think that it could be a great thing for the city of Evanston, and it will cut off the criticism that we often get that our processes are flawed.
Thank you, candidate Trippi.
Thank you. This is a really important question, and I'm glad that the mayor-elect has chosen to make this one of his priorities, and I will be interested to hearing his perspective. I believe that zoning must be used as a tool for equity and for bringing affordability to this town. And I think we can do that effectively as long as we create that affordability plan before we change any zoning. It was pointed out to me that if we change the R1 zoning, especially in my neighborhood here in the 6th Ward, and created smaller lots with the intention of builders building smaller houses, that would be a great aspiration. And yet the developer would take a look at that smaller lot and decide to build a 4-story, skinny, tall, multi-million-dollar house because he could, and he could sell that house in my neighborhood. So we have to be intentional in our zoning changes. We have to have a comprehensive plan that would outlaw the type of developer, workarounds that we would come up against. But yes, zoning can be used very effectively for creating more equitable and affordable housing.
Thank you. The next question goes first to candidate Brzezinski. Does the Sustainability Office need more funding and/or staff to achieve the city climate action and resilience plan goals? What would be the most productive uses for additional funding?
Oh, well, I'm not sure that the Sustainability Office does need more money. I think we need to ask them, and if they had it, what they would do with it, if that's what the question is. Because I think that as a council, we have, the CARP plan that we can work on implementing, and we should be doing that through the ordinances and getting the staff and having more public education and awareness. One of the issues that I'm just a little bothered by is with our own city, I think everything we do needs to be with that in mind. Everything we build, everything we renovate needs to be that in mind. And I go back to the Robert Crown Center, which is the largest project we've done. And I'm not aware, and I think that is a huge carbon footprint with 2 ice rinks, and I'm not sure that they put any geothermal or They have AstroTurf, which is not great for the environment. Couldn't we have done something green with more natural? So I think we need to look at ourselves. I think there's experts out in the community that we can bring together with our sustainability group, but I don't think just hiring more consultants is the answer and more people to work. I think we have the answer within the community by making the decisions that follow our CARP plan and build on that. I would love to see more initiatives in the community that we can just do in terms of reducing waste, reducing paper, the plastics and things like that. So my initial reaction is I'm not inclined to think that we need it.
Thank you. Candidate Ravel.
Well, last month at City Council, we had an implementation update from our Sustainability and Resilience Manager, Kumar Jensen. And he was pretty clear in his presentation that additional resources are needed. Even just changing an ordinance to make, for example, update our building code requires some staff time. And our current staff needs additional technical assistance to be able to do some of these things. Kumar mentioned having a staff person who could work with many local organizations in the community, the volunteer groups that are ready and eager to help implement CARP. There'd be better coordination and guidance if there was a city representative coordinating those kinds of meetings and those efforts. Additional resources also to provide some incentives to help businesses or homeowners make the changes, for example, to their buildings to make them more energy efficient. So additional resources would be very helpful, I think, to implementation of CARP. Its goals are huge, and it's going to take a huge effort.
Thank you. Now, Ward 6, Candidate Trippy will go first.
Thank you. My answer is a definite yes. We need more staffing in that sustainability office. We are so lucky in this town to have a wealth of knowledge and expertise and volunteers who are helping on various committees, hundreds of volunteers that are lending that expertise to help us do better. We are actually on our third CARP program because we've been able to achieve the goals of the previous two. And again, we are so progressive in this area. More staff would allow us to pull that information from our volunteers and coordinate our efforts more effectively and help us to meet those audacious goals that we have set of being carbon neutral by 2050, which I think is a great goal.
Thank you. Candidate Suffredin.
Sure. I mean, obviously the easy answer is absolutely more resources, more employees. But the reality is resources mean your tax dollars. So I think if we're going to choose to add staff to the sustainability office, and that may be a wise policy choice. I saw Kumar Jensen this morning, and one of the things he shared with me was that the summer youth employment program gives him some of his best people because we have a very engaged high school aged environmental people in Evanston. So what kind of work can we have them do where they gain experience and it's coordinated and it isn't bringing on a full-time employee? Now, if Kumar were to say, I need 3 more employees and I'm for this purpose to achieve this objective by this time, it will all be specific and measurable. That's a discussion we should have. But whenever we talk about adding resources to things that are valuable or meaningful, while it's true, it means at some point we're going to have to make a decision to prioritize things, not do other things, or raise taxes on people. And that's part of our overall council culture that needs to change, where we look at things like, this is a great idea. This will cost as much. This is a great idea. How much does that cost? And then it adds up at the end and then the numbers don't work. So yes, I would like to see more resources given to a lot of things, but I don't know if that's a responsible policy choice in light of all of our budget concerns everywhere else.
Thank you. Thank you. The next question goes first to Ward 7, Candidate Ravel. Evanston uses the council manager form of government, but the state allows other types. What form of government do you think is most appropriate for Evanston? And what are your reasons?
Well, I do support our current council manager form of government. I think a community that has of our size with a $300 million budget and 700, 800 employees, I'm not sure what the current number is, requires professional management. Council manager form of government allows the council manager to focus on administration and implementation, and then it gives the council working with community input to set the policy goals that then the council manager is going to implement. I happen to be looking at the website for the Illinois Council Manager Association, and there are a number of studies that they've done to kind of document the track record of communities with council manager form of government versus the strong mayor form of government. It makes for some surprising reading. They found that 57% of communities with a council manager form of government are 57% less likely to have an example of corruption. So I don't know, I do think our system is working well for us here in Evanston, and I would support maintaining it.
Thank you, Candidate Rosinski.
I've heard both sides of this question, and I honestly am not exactly sure, because it may have just been that our council hasn't been effective over the last 8-10 years of working with the manager so that people feel represented. I've heard too many times at council meetings, or I've been at, been at the issues where I'm going to talk about an issue that has already come through staff recommendation without even the alderperson knowing about it. And to me, there's something wrong with the way ours is existing. It may be good, but I think we have to look at it. I have heard that going to a mayor form of government would be discriminatory, that people wouldn't be able, everyone wouldn't be able to do it. But I would like to point out the last 8 years, the people who have come to the council have come in with hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that doesn't guarantee diversity. I just want to be sure everyone's on the same page with that. And a manager may still stay, even if you do have a strong mayor. You may just have a manager who is really well qualified and can do it. I think we have to look at it. There's pluses and minuses for each one. But I think right now I've heard at council, well, we can't do that. We can't interfere with the manager because no one will come work for us. I'm like, well, that's not right, because you're the decision makers. It ultimately falls on the city council to make decisions, and we need to get that information from the staff.
Thank you. Thank you. The same question to Ward 6, Candidate Suffredin.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think the answer is what form of government is best for Evanston. It's the form of government that delivers the best, highest level of service at the best value to residents. And that may be the council manager form of government. It may be a different form of government. I think, like I said with zoning, and like I've said with many things, it's worth looking at what other possibilities there are. Now, if we were going to do a change of form of government, it would require a referendum. It wouldn't be voted on by council on a Monday night. So it would be a large discussion. Is it worth undertaking that discussion? Possibly. Like, is it in an immediate need? Not really. But I think if we don't examine how we do things and look for better ways to do things, then we aren't serving the purpose that the government is supposed to serve. I would be interested to know what the total cost of government would be under a different system. Would it cost more? Would it cost less? Right now, one of the issues that has come up under the current form is that staff is not directly accountable to residents. They're accountable to other staff, who's accountable to other staff, who's accountable to a city manager. And the city manager is, in theory, supervised by the council, but that hasn't always been the case. So the question is, are those flaws in the way that we've been executing this form of government? Are these flaws inherent to the form of government, and should we change it? So like with anything, it's worthy of discussion and consideration, but I don't think it's a top priority for an immediate action by the next council in early 2021.
Thank you. Candidate Trippi.
Thank you for that question. I agree with Eleanor that the current form of government seems to be the most appropriate for our size city and our budget. I definitely want a professional involved in managing those two aspects of our city. Again, I invite the League of Women Voters to take a look at this question. I think I agree with Alderman Suffredin that it doesn't harm us to at least take a look at whether it would be a cost-saving measure. I do have concerns about the accessibility of the mayor's office for all citizens for running. And I can tell you that if the city council members become professional politicians, that would dissuade candidates like myself in running for office, someone who's been involved in the Evanston community all of my life, mostly in the not-for-profit sector. I know my stepdad would never have wanted to be a professional city council member. So I think we have to really think what changes that any change in our form of government would bring to the fabric of our town.
Thank you. This will be, the next question will be the last question, and it goes first to candidate Rosinski of the 7th Ward. Can you explain to voters your understanding of what is involved in planning and operating using an equity lens?
Oh, that's good. I think that planning and operating a city of our size means that every decision that we make, every policy that we implement needs to be inclusive, and we need to make sure that all people are represented racially, economically, and socially. One of the things that, like, I look at the affordable housing and say, is that an equitable process? And I'm really having a hard time reconciling myself with that one because of the fact that we have a target that's an AMI for about 80% of the people in town, and they're making about 90% of the $90,000. But we say we value diversity, but the people that, the non-white people that, if you're looking at a colored diversity, are making an AMI of $40,000. So do all of our policies with affordable housing break up into an 80-20 position? I don't see it, but we as a home rule can do that. We can create a policy that makes sure we're including the AMI of our non-white residents, because we need to help everyone be affordable. We just need to start thinking outside the box. We need to think of creative ideas on how to do things that are really, truly inclusive. So I think it's a tough question that we can bring to the table and talk about it.
Thank you. Candidate Rubel.
Well, it is a tough issue, and I think it's going to take us a long time to really get to where we want to be sure that we are truly a fair and equitable community for all our residents. I know staff has been doing a lot of work to make sure that staff is on the right track to getting the right training, getting the right, setting the right goals to be truly equitable in the way they deliver community services. I think we probably need to have more of a conversation with the broader community about how we can all contribute to making this a more equitable community. In terms of areas where the city council needs to have this center front in terms of its decision-making, not only in affordable housing, as candidate Rosinski pointed out, also I think certainly in our budget process. And I'd like us to start much earlier in the year with setting our coming up with our wish list for what we want to see in the next city budget. So we aren't waiting till, I know we spend 3 or 4 months on it. It seems like it goes on a long time, but we should be providing input well before the budget season starts. For example, people have talked about we need to not require residents to purchase beach tokens. And I think that would be a really great goal, but we need to put that into the budget way months before we get to actually creating that budget document, so that we've come up with the funding that we would need to be able to cover the
Thank
beach
you.
expenses. Thanks.
Thank you. Same question goes to Ward 6, candidate Trippy.
Thank you so much. I have to say that I'm very proud to work for the McGaw YMCA in Evanston, and we have been on a journey toward becoming an anti-racist organization for all of the years that I have worked there, over 16 years. So I have quite a bit of training and actual practice of putting these principles into practice in my everyday work. To me, the meaning of using a lens of equity in the decisions that you're making involves inviting people into the conversation who otherwise might not be there, and ensuring that you recognize as you have the discussion who is still not represented at the table for whatever reason. Bringing voices together and listening for common ideas and common ground is the work of diversity and equity, and bringing all aspects of a decision to light before the decision is actually made. I think we can do this at the City Council. I think it will take some training, and I'm glad to lend the resources and experience that I've had at the YMCA to those efforts.
Thank you. Candidate Suffredin.
I think the most specific thing that we can do is, rather than talking about viewing things through an equity lens, is developing a framework where we look at every ordinance that is passed through an equity impact note on every ordinance. Because I think, and I'll use the example that Eleanor brought up about beach tokens, beach access is an equity issue. Parking is an equity issue. Construction equity issue. There are equity impacts to every decision that we make, and we need to have an actual specific framework by which we analyze ordinances, rather than say we looked at this through the lens of equity. Have specific scoring on whether this has a positive or negative impact on our equity goals, if we're getting closer or farther away by doing this action. That's something that we don't do, and it creates problems. And I know the focus is often on racial equity, and rightfully so, but there's also equity relating to mobility. There's equity relating to age. There are all sorts of issues, and particularly as we look at our city, and we discussed zoning, we discussed reparations, and how we make our city, which is often geographically fractured by things like the canal and bridges. How do we work to make those types of infrastructure improvements with equity in mind? One of the discussions when the North Branch Library was closed was that there may be another branch library. How do we make that physically accessible for everyone? Those types of equity discussions need to happen, and actually in specific and measurable ways, rather than through a lens of equity. And that's what I hope that we'll do in the next council.
Thank you. Now we will go to closing statements. Candidates will have 90 seconds. And closing statements will be given in reverse order from the opening statements. Ward 7 will go first. Candidate Rosinski.
Hi. Well, I'd just like to say that as a mom of 5 raising my kids here, as a full-time mom, as a person who has been through the trial of real estate, where you don't get to pay your bills trying. You have to be successful. And, I went through the global meltdown. I know what it's like to get kicked to the ground and then get back up from that, and how your budget is everything that you do to have your family. Our Evanston family starts with our fiscal planning, our capital improvements projects. I have been actively engaged for 25 years. I've been the founding member of well over 7 or 8 community organizations that are still in existence now, because I do believe in building unity, and I do believe that good neighborhoods make a good city, and that we have to work on that consistently. When we say that we want to have equity in the community, I think we really have to look at what that means and how we're going to achieve it with every decision we make in our parks and our plans and our beachfronts. I've been endorsed by the, 8 organizations. 3 of them are the grassroots that are going for equity. 2 of them are housing organizations, Illinois Association of Realtors and Reclaim. And I think that if you talk to people around, they know that I don't get over emotional. I like information. I like to have the facts before me so that we can all make intelligent decisions. And I will be here for you to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ravel.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to talk with the community. I have really been honored to represent the 7th Ward for the past 5 years, and I would welcome the opportunity to continue to represent the residents of the 7th Ward. I think I've been a responsive alderman, listening to my residents' concerns and questions and trying to get the answers and connect them with the services that they're looking for. On the council, I have 3 primary focus areas that I am invested in and that I would like to continue working on. One, obviously, is the implementation of our climate action and resilience plan. I've been a lifelong climate activist, and this is really a personal passion for me. A second area is affordable housing. I've been on the Housing and Homelessness Commission, and also I'm on the Affordable Housing Plan Steering Committee. We need to wrap up our work on an affordable housing plan for Evanston and begin to implement that. And the third issue that I'm working on is setting up and implementing an alternative 911 response program so that we can send mental health, behavioral health specialists to a crisis situation that does not require an armed police officer. And that will provide a much better outcome for our residents who are in crisis and need something besides a police response. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ward 6, Candidate Trippy.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been a great conversation. I would just like to say that my friend Tom Suffredin likes to vote no. He did vote no on reparations when it came up the first time before there was a plan in place. He will vote no again on Monday night, undoubtedly, when the reparations plan is put before the City Council. He and I have very different leadership styles and communication styles. I think that's been pointed up in this forum very clearly. I am a collaborator and a convener. I try to call people into conversations rather than leaving them out. I am able to listen for common ideas, common goals, and come up with and facilitate concessions and consensus. I will promise to be civil and respectful to all who I meet and in all of my interactions with people during my term as in the City Council. Please visit my website. It's trippyforevanston.com to learn more about my campaign. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you.
Thank you, Candidate Suffredin.
Thank you. And thank you for this forum. I very much appreciate it. And I do vote no a lot. And I'd rather not. I would rather have better ordinances brought here that you can vote yes on. It's a responsibility for people who are in elected office to not accept bad policy, bad budgets, bad ordinances that are drafted by staff automatically. And that is what this job is. It is the job of an alderman in this form of government to check staff when they're wrong. That's what I do. I would love to vote yes. I want to vote yes. I would prefer to get to yes on everything. But the reality is when it's time to vote no, you need somebody there who's willing to do it. Say, this is not good enough. Bring it back when it's better. Show me when this is done. This costs too much. We cannot do this. Again, I'd rather not have to be in that position. I think with a new mayor and a city manager who is going to realize that she will be held accountable by a council and residents and who is capable, I won't have to vote no as much because we're going to have better things brought to us by the staff. And that's what this job is, demanding the best from the staff for the people that we serve. And that's what I do. And I appreciate that my friend Katie Trippy thinks that that is not what this job is, but that is exactly what this job is. This job is to be a check on staff on behalf of the residents we serve. I look forward to doing it for another 4 years.
Thank you. That concludes the forum. It will be available tomorrow on the League's website at lwve.org and on their YouTube channel. And just a reminder, early voting begins next Monday, this coming Monday, March 22nd, and Election Day is Tuesday, April 6th. We encourage you to vote. Thank you to the candidates, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Evanston Public Library.
Thank you.